and exercise such powers in the name of dealing with the rights of the people, the liberties of the people, etc., when actually they are known and can be proven easily, once you understand jurisdiction, to be criminal operations and criminal enterprises by people that may look just like you, that you thought were operating properly in jurisdiction, when actually they're subdivisions of a criminal operation, i.e. known as the United States Trading Service Company, which is not a country, never was. Now that's the truth. Get over it and learn about jurisdiction. Or was it, I was feeling you was going to ask me something else.
I just wanted to say that a lot of people, like you said, are not aware of the fact that the U.S. Service Corporation is a corporation, not a country, and that the situation that we're undergoing right now is not national, it is global. Because of the tentacles that are more global, we see ourselves as separate, not realizing that yes, we will say sometimes that we are under occupation, but not realizing that just like we see when the U.S. would go over to, say, Vietnam or one of these other countries and take up, that's exactly what is going on here. Now,
look at the statement that you just made. And this is where understanding jurisdiction, again, comes in comprehension becomes important. The training, because it's also training, the linguistic training of referring to the foreign corporation as person. And so we say the U.S. went there, the U.S. didn't go anywhere. The owners of the U.S. corporation, who are beneficiaries of the human trafficking corporation styled as the U.S. for their own benefit, have been exercising war powers in violation of international law, in violation of treaties, and in violation of Constitution, to which they are by law to be a creature, which they are not. On multiple levels can be easily proven, not only to be a criminal enterprise that doesn't take deep thought, but by the rule of law of treaties and Constitution, it's absolutely obvious. However, again, subject matter tonight, why is it not on the lips of the people talking about this properly? Why do the people keep calling the U.S. person? Why do they keep, it's like somebody say, the car went over here and ran over my lawn. The car did not run over your lawn. The person who was operating that vehicle by choice, or usually not by accident, rolled over your lawn because they're pissed off because you wouldn't give them some of your flowers, so they ran over your flowers. Now, you can charge the car all you want to. Now, let the car testify. Can the car testify?
Nope.
Does the car steer itself?
Nope.
Oh, who steered the car? Some living man or woman, etc. Who has jurisdiction over that car?
The operator.
And they're sitting behind what is known as the steering wheel, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
So the car did nothing. But when you say that the car did something, you just, again, created a false jurisdiction. This is part of the linguistic corruption that has caused us unknowingly to do what is called voluntary jurisdiction, and thus consent to the injury that is perpetrated under a color of law. And this is, again, why over the years, a lot of times people think that we're being picky when we stop them and say, no, stop. Know the distinction between the living and the dead. Those are jurisdictions. They absolutely are. And this is why, as an example, you'll see in international law, as an example, for those of you who do a little bit of research, certain arguments that come in international law, some of the recent ones that are very effective and that affect everybody in the commercial world, would be the arguments that was brought before the International Court of Law between France and the corporate country, and the owners of the United States. And keep in mind, we're going to go into this, but you've heard us talk about this here and there. The United States platform owners lost the case. This has much to do with what we talk about in lesson book 14 and 14A1 years ago in 92, 3, 4, 5, and 6, with Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was CEO of the United States Service Corporation Company at that time in 1954 to 1956, relinquished jurisdiction at Morocco, which is actually the land, because they made claims on the land under the Unum Sanctum operations, which they've been operating under colonial operations. And when they lost that case to France, who actually had a superior claim, because that's what that case is really all about. And you see people don't talk about that because they don't want people to know that these persons who own the United States Corporation Company clearly, not only by law and right, have no jurisdiction over the people. They have no jurisdiction to be continuously operating on the land of North America. And so you see a lot of the motivations of them creating, particularly, and exercising and what you call accelerating their operations under a color of law during the 1954 to the 1960 area. And then you recognize, if you understand the real politics, what we're telling you, jurisdiction, why Dwight D. Eisenhower, when he saw that happening, etc., warned the people of the industrial military, the congressional industrial military complex. If you don't understand jurisdiction, that's just some kind of historical statement that you hear and people talk about and not understand what it actually means. And they don't necessarily understand what is the motivation as to why Dwight D. Eisenhower relinquished jurisdiction at Morocco. And now you have the issues of the treaties, etc., that people don't want to talk about, etc. And this is has much to do when I did lesson book 14 years ago, that I split the books, because it was hard enough to get the people even to look at these matters, less more take these matters seriously. And so I did 14A1, Protocols of Liberty, which at that time we did not desktop publish, which many of you who have a history with us know about that. But you need to know the motivations behind it. So you're really talking about jurisdictions, and people, particularly our people, really have no idea how far-reaching, how in-depth, and how serious this matter is concerning jurisdiction. Yes, go ahead.
Question, with regard to these persons that have jurisdiction, claim to have jurisdiction over the land.
And I respectfully say this is what we must do. And this is part of what we're talking about right now. We've got to start carefully picking our words and start consciously, because this is what's been happening. I'll tell you what's happening. And a lot of times when, over the years, you'll see me correct people. And what I recognize that many times they don't really get the seriousness of why that correction is made. Because you're having conversations with people that are working towards fixing these things. And it's sort of like getting someone to put a filter on a dirty water source and discussing the filter and why they put it on there, and then defecating it in the water after it comes through the filter. And they don't recognize that they just did that. And that would be called voluntary jurisdiction, and thus consent. This is why you hear very often politicians who know about the corruption or the potential of corruption say, they'll make this statement: people get the government they deserve. What he's saying is that the people, through whether there's ignorance or whether they're traitors at heart, are given voluntary jurisdiction to a corrupt and non-jurisdictional party who is exercising de facto venues under the guise of government, and thus are consenting to their enslavement while turning around, then starting organizations and marching all over the place, making fools of themselves, not getting justice because it hasn't dawned on them that they're dealing with a totally de facto platform that has no lawful jurisdiction whatsoever, but they keep volunteering into the false jurisdiction. Their estates and their property immediately goes into probate because they then turn around and refer to themselves as persons of color, which takes them out of the political platforms of civilized government. And they've just declared that they're artificial persons, and therefore the occupiers are using their artificial person corporation in first person to the persons who now are artificial as first persons and are claiming jurisdictional authority over them as an estate. This is what reversion of estate actually is. And this is the basis on how they've been actually gentrifying communities, and they've been doing it constantly. And rather than our people talk about and study jurisdiction, they will follow the training line. And this is the training line for rats and imbeciles. Racism, prejudice in our communities. And as soon as they go there, now they're back into the hands of Carlos Linnaeus and the U.S. Census Bureau for stock, because they just agreed to be stock in the U.S. corporation, which is a corporation, not a country. Now they are stock, and now the owners of the stock can create new bonds and issue new bonds. So I guarantee you they're going to be looking for new stock and putting a census out under the Carlos Linnaeus paradigm of race. And the people who don't understand jurisdiction are going to sign those instruments and perpetrate fraud against themselves, and then start complaining again because they don't understand jurisdiction. Now, that's a fact.
So how do we get out from under that jurisdiction?
Now, it's called averment of jurisdiction. So now you're talking about, we back to, I told people, write these things down, territorial jurisdiction. If you ask the people listening now, and many people who have been taking our people and taking finance from them and organizing institutions and marching them around on the land, complaining about due process and complaining about justice and arguing racism, if you ask them what is territorial jurisdiction, how many of them will give you a clear, definitive, and competent answer? Because that's part of what they're dealing with. How many of them will deal with in personam jurisdiction? Because that's what they're dealing with. And how many of them will deal or address to these people subject matter jurisdiction? Because exactly what they're dealing with, all of those things. And then you're dealing with the problem of voluntary jurisdiction, dealing with misrepresentation and non-consent. And these people's rights and liberties are in probate while they're marching and praying all over the place. And it is a known fact what I'm saying. I'm not talking opinion. This is known fact. And then they believe that these people who are marching them all over the place are jurisdictionally competent. I don't condemn them. I will say, let the people learn what jurisdiction is, and the people themselves will start straightening this stuff up. But if they insist on playing this game of race and color games and prejudice and marching around the place, making themselves fools, and don't understand jurisdiction, because when they do that, they're in a false foreign alien jurisdiction. And keep in mind, foreign in law does not mean distance in the aggregate format. And most people think it means distance, aggregate distance geographically. And that is an aspect of foreign, but that is not political jurisdiction foreign. And people need to know this because that's what's been going on. Really, really. And the interesting thing is, what we're talking about right now is really not unknown. It is clearly known. And those who are violating you every day in the name of racism and in the name of courts and in the name of city operatives and in the names of the gangs of New York pretending to be officers of law calling themselves their most recent operations of being commercial mercenaries, known as the Fraternal Order of Police, etc., are knowingly operating in a politically foreign jurisdiction, and that they themselves are foreign by law foreign, and foreign to the Constitution that granted them no jurisdictional powers whatsoever, and the treaties that supersede the Constitution that disallows such activities on the land and against the people. And no one's been challenging it. They've been sitting around talking the controlled argument, race. Oh, they're racist. Oh, they took our sandwiches and stuff. Oh, they won't give us a peanut butter sandwich with jelly on it like they gave everybody else. Let us march and let us pray. And they start that. And of course, at that point, they're volunteering into a false jurisdiction, a foreign jurisdiction, abandoning the platforms of treaties and constitutions which were in place to protect them and secure their rights in these matters. And they now volunteer themselves under a color of law and under ignorance into a foreign jurisdiction. And now, again, they are stock of the corporate operatives of the United States corporate company, which is a foreign jurisdiction, and the operatives of it are in breach of Constitution and treaty because they're not a party to it, nor are people of color because they're off the platform of civilized, organized government. Why? The Constitution for the United States is derived from Muslim law, and it's derived from the treaties, the mother treaty, commonly known as the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, Treaty of Algiers, the Treaty of Tripoli, etc. These collectively are known as the Treaty of Peace and Friendship with the Moroccan Empire and Great Britain. And the United States Corporation Company is a subdivisional corporate entity, colony, business of Great Britain, and not a country. And those such persons who own it have been in rebellion, etc., against Britain. Therefore, they are de facto on multiple levels. However, what they have done have entrenched themselves and create what you call a private military arsenal operations. And this is why they have corporate, what they call military bases in roughly around 189 countries around the world, to maintain the false pretext and the false platform of these false jurisdictions. And this is the common source of the world's problems today. Not that there aren't other problems coming from other political jurisdictions, but that is in fact what the source of your economic, social, and political problems are right now, and your jurisdictional problems in relationship to a lack of due process, a lack of justice. You'll hear our people constantly talking about no justice, no peace, yet they will not acknowledge the treaties and the constitutions that were set in place on their behalf by their forefathers, who are Moors, and they would prefer to call themselves Negroes, blacks, and coloreds, which are brand systems of the owners of the United States Service Corporation Company under colonial operations. Those things that I just stated are provable facts, and thus come under what is called consent via voluntary jurisdictions, and thus are taken outside of the human family, and the protections of international law, because they themselves deny nationality, thus deny national laws and international laws that were put in place to secure their rights, not give them rights. And so now what we're dealing with is a whole body of people operating under false jurisdictions. All of their estates, their rights, and their liberties are in probate jurisdiction without their knowledge of it. And they're arguing skin complexion and racism, which is a paradigm set up by Frederick Johann Blumenbach and Carlos Linnaeus, and used in the U.S. corporation human trafficking venue census, etc. That's a fact.
I have some questions. I'm going to take some questions.
Right.
Here's a question. is there another power that can challenge them? And I guess it says, and is willing to, a nation that is under treaty, i.e. an ally.
Well, of course, that's what you're supposed to do. Now, here we go, jurisdiction. So now, yes, you're correct in the question. The question is valid. Now, name the parties in treaty specifically. And if you start talking about people of color, you're already, and by law, you can't even open your mouth because it wouldn't concern you. Now, name the nation states, name the treaties, and then name the sections of the treaties that are in breach or violation. That's where you begin. That's the power. But I'm presenting this to you and this question to you. Have you been seeing the so-called persons of color leader guys having this kind of conversation in relationship to jurisdiction, in relationship to enforcing the treaties? Because that's the venue. Though that's the jurisdiction that the arguments are made when abridgments of people's rights and liberties are concerned, when due process of law is concerned, when justice is executed under law is concerned, you're talking political jurisdictions. Why are they not talking jurisdictions? Well, you can determine yourself after you do a little bit of study whether or not they've been honest with you, or whether or not some of these people you've trusted are actually compromised extremely. Okay. Subject matter jurisdiction. Just a reminder. Now, those of you who've been listening, I trust that you wrote down some of the aspects of jurisdiction that we presented to you, because it's very important. And some of the questions that might arise with you will be, you'll answer them yourselves, truthfully, once you start analyzing. And but of import at the moment, the people need to understand that all estates, etc. And this is particular with those who have been recently arguing the issue of birth certificates, claiming the birth, this type of thing. What you have is the operations of the foreign de facto operatives of the United States Service Corporation actually doing human trafficking, and then claiming jurisdiction, aggregate territorial jurisdiction, which doesn't exist with them, and judicial jurisdiction, which doesn't exist with them, and exercising power of what is known as eminent domain by claiming people's estates and property, which would be called probate. And so that now you're dealing with probate jurisdiction. Those are, on the immediate term, the subject matters that you're dealing with. You're not dealing with racism. You're dealing with political jurisdictions. Yes, you are.
Question.
Go ahead.
Addie Simmons, what's the end game during and after the Trump administration for Moors?
Well, what you see right now, and I've told people for the last 3 or 4 years since Donald J. Trump, took the position with the bankrupt United States Corporation, Human Trafficking Corporation company, with the promise of the quote that you hear him say, "Making America Great Again." Now you must be cognizant of what is America and then what is United States Service Corporation, which are two distinctions. So now that's a commitment in relationship to the corporate activity on the land America. Now you're going to have to make in both your mind and in your political speech and speaking a distinction between America and the United States Corporation company that the people have been falsely, back to our beginning of our conversation, owners have been caught falsely claiming to be Americans. You're not talking about the same thing. Now, Donald J. Trump is, as we talked and told the people 3 years ago, put in place by some military operatives of the defunct United States Service Corporation company, who've been trying to restore the republic platform of governance under a treaty and constitution established, operated at North America, which actually have been overthrown. And by one of the methodologies by which the owners of the criminal enterprise known as the United States has been operating, to the point that not only have they been raping and murdering people around the world, they start murdering the people of the land and stealing their property. And to the point that now many of the hybrid Europeans who have been for decades and the last couple centuries the beneficiaries of the reconstruction of the history at and on the land jurisdiction of North America, and have gone along with the false paradigm. Now knowing and noticing that they've been losing their estates and their jobs and their accounts, etc., you'll see and will be seeing more of them tell the truth. However, they're still, for the most part, having claims or jurisdictional claims on estates, or the source from which their estates were evolved by profit, on estates that were not and are not and never were theirs in the first instance, upon which their wealth was built. So their wealth was built under false pretexts in the first instance. And this is back to people understanding jurisdiction. Now, in relationship to starting to fix this thing, we're going to have to start talking the original, that's another phrase, original jurisdictions. So now you're talking about natural persons, natural people distinguished from artificial persons. And then now you're talking about estates, reversion of estates, and trust. This is the area that you're going to be making your discussions and your research when you're talking about remedies in this area. And when you're talking about exercising powers, or what you would be saying, what other powers, now you're talking in jurisdiction, because jurisdiction in law actually means power, or the power to act. And so you need to understand the synonyms of jurisdiction, etc. And this is why over the years, we've taken multiple opportunities at different times to express the issue of reversion of estates, trusts, because everything is operating in trust and in contract law, etc. But what you have, the problem that you have, is you have a de facto criminal enterprise operations of criminal foreign persons claiming to be Americans who have entrenched themselves and have actually been attacking the people. This is what's going on. And back to Donald Trump. Donald Trump's assignment, one of his assignments, is, and assignments in this relationship, to restore the credibility of legitimate governing operations, even though it was already abandoned, if you get the point, of the defunct United States Republic, the original republic under treaty and constitution, distinguished from the U.S. corporate operatives of human trafficking and those platforms, which have been in operation since 1862. That's just simply the fact. And they're official, which we've told you over and over again. Most of you know, this is for those who don't know, to give you references so that you can examine some of the things that we're saying and refine your view on what we're saying and make yourself more competent. So now you're dealing with what we've told you continuously over and over again. The Organic Act of Congress, February the 2nd, 1871. And this is important for you to understand, because they've created another foreign jurisdiction, but they also named it the United States. You know, and people don't know that these are actually different corporate entities, and three of them are all de facto, and which is another reason why the impostoring persons who are actually vested members of the Roman Curia and board, are actually on the board of directors, and members of the Circle Church and Chancery, which you have been calling congressmen and senators, etc. And you'll notice that they will never bring up the subject matter in the Constitution for the United States of the nobility clause, and also the fact that persons of the Circle Church and Chancery by law were never to hold office under the legitimate republic operations of the United States of America, republic operating under treaty law, and that's the basis of their legitimacy. You will never hear them talking about that. And you'll never hear persons call themselves people of color who have been pretending to love people of African descent, Asiatic Africans who have been abused under the Spanish Inquisition, and pretend that they're arguing their rights. You will see them always, 90% of the time, bring up 14th Amendment civil rights persons, not knowing that that's actually corporate stock. They know it is, but I'm saying that the people have not been aware that that's corporate stock for the United States Corporation Company. Of course, logically, ultimately, they get no remedy and they get no justice because it wasn't structured for that. It was structured to deceive. And again, here we go again, the importance of comprehending really jurisdiction. And it can't be emphasized enough. However, I also know that if we could get more people, because we know a lot of you out there have been studying over the years, but we've also been experiencing opposition from people on our side of the nation who should have actually been teaching the people this, who, for whatever reason, and I'm not condemning them, they made their choices to hide this information, to attack those persons like myself who've been teaching people civics, who did not want this information out, who have corporate construct jurisdictional issues themselves called 501c3s, corporate entities, corporately registered under the corporate municipals, corporations and the municipal states, all of which they are known to be de facto. And logically, what happens is that the people's estates go automatically into probate jurisdiction. And of course, then the persons who own the corporate states, etc., operations have been stealing their property, their accounts, their lands, their houses, etc., and gentrifying their communities under probate jurisdiction. Now, that is the truth. So I'm saying that to say this, we need to, and there's other information that logically will accompany this information. We need to do as much as we can to get our people civically cognizant and civically competent so that we can start addressing, exercising power that you already have, that you have not been using, to counter, or what you call, make averment or averment claims against the false claims of jurisdiction. Because keep this in mind when you're looking at House Joint Resolution 192, etc., and the things that took place even with Woodrow Wilson in 1913, is that they've created a false foreign jurisdiction, gave it the air of legitimacy, created false or counterfeit, and have been calling it money in violation of the Constitution, and actually created false foreign alien jurisdictions for these private commercial instruments, etc., and then use color of law to enforce them. And that's what you're suffering from. You're not suffering from racism. You're suffering from color of law and the assumed jurisdiction in foreign jurisdictions, and all property thereafter of persons who agree to be colored come under what is known as jurisdictional probate, which is what's been happening. And of course, they use that as a basis to falsely exercise power called eminent domain, which can only be done by nationals, and is actually done by persons who own foreign corporations, who are foreign corporate entities themselves, and they have been exercising jurisdictional powers over the people's physical persons, over the subject matters, and over the territories of the land. And the persons who've been marching our people around will not tell them the truth that that's where their problem is. They'll start talking about skin color, which is another false jurisdiction. It's what it is. Don't get mad, get wise. And I'm not attacking your marching, praying leader guide, so don't go there. Let the knowledge expose them for who they really are. But I bet you they're not poor. I bet you they got trusts unbeknownst to you. I bet you they got so-called multi-million-dollar planes to go all around the place to keep promoting what they themselves know is a fraud. And they use different versions of gods to do it. Whatever version, what flavor god you into? Which one of the other gods that's really the other god, that's the real god of the other god that you're talking about, that's the real one, that's whose jurisdiction you're claiming to be under. This is what's going on. And that's not an insult, I'm just telling you the truth. And you need to start facing the truth that we collectively have demonstrated severe, violently severe incompetence to our injury in the process.
So, some questions?
Now, while Dr. Naila is reading some of the questions, I'm going to go over jurisdiction of subject matter as an example. So jurisdiction of subject matter means jurisdiction of the class of cases to which particular cases belong. And so whenever there's different subject matters, whether you're dealing with estate, land, trust, all these things are always in operation, etc. The subject matter would be the classification of the cases either litigated or in litigation based on national and international law, i.e. treaties and international intercourse and interchange, etc., by which these things can be settled. And thus, averments of jurisdictions and quo warrantos are common in order for these things to be resolved. This is why those of you who have any basic knowledge of organized government and civilization and jurisprudence know that persons or people who do not have a nationality or have been stripped of their nationality are not afforded proper venue by which to argue their issues or their cases, because 90% of them do not understand jurisdiction and therefore are tagged already as minority or incompetent. And then, of course, they put them in the foreign jurisdiction under a representative of the Roman Curia via the foreign jurisdiction of the barristers, British accredited registry, Bar Association, in violation of treaty and in violation of Constitution for the United States, and thus being officers of the private foreign courts of the Circle Church and Chancery, take leave over the people's estates and then deliver them to the states, and then by eminent domain claim sovereign jurisdiction over their property and thus gentrify targeted neighborhoods. That, what I just told you, is how it's done and why it's done. Examine it and you'll see for yourself. And I guarantee you, after you do some serious examination, if you continue to follow people, keep talking about marching and praying all over the place and talking about racism, then you are choosing a position that I guarantee will not come out in your best interest and continue the pattern of insanity that's been going on for quite a few generations with no resolution and no justice. Because you can't talk about justice or judicial process without talking jurisdiction. That's a fact. Now, there was a question that you were looking at, Dr. Nair?
So, yeah, I'm just kind of going through. I'm trying to, okay. Someone wants to know how you feel about the funding of the policy enforcers. I saw that.
I would take a position, not how I feel about it, but I'll make a statement on it.
Okay.
The persons that are known as policy enforcers, that some people have been calling them, are members. So let's talk. One of the things that when we talk about jurisdiction, we need to start talking about proper person and proper terms of who and what you're talking about. So when they're talking about policy enforcers, they're actually talking about an organized body of for-profit, sometimes calling themselves not-for-profit religious organization and a political platform known as the Fraternal Order of Police, who are actually commercial mercenaries in contract with the subdivisional franchisees of the United States Service Corporation Company, which is bankrupt, to enforce unum sanctum policies against the people of the land under international occupational forces, and have been falsely calling themselves law officers and are not sanctioned by treaty nor by constitution to operate on the land. Now you answer the question for yourself.
So from a standpoint of,
they should have never been funded.
We should have our
not by law. They shouldn't have been funded.
The sheriffs are the.
Of course, that's why they don't talk about sheriffs or Sharifian law, which is constitutional law. You know, so I mean, this stuff is not hard to research, but you know, once you start thinking for yourself, you can see the corruption. And the deal of it is, while discussing it, we need to be cognizant of the different jurisdictions that arise within the structure of the conversations relative to people's rights, their liberties, their estates, and their trusts. And understand that all operations in government come under trust law too. The treaties come under trust law. Constitution comes under trust law. Why is it that these people who are in these positions of trust, they're claiming positions? See, now you want to understand jurisdiction again. There are some people who are in position of trust who are legitimate. Problem: the majority of them are illegitimately claiming jurisdictional powers that not only don't belong to them, were never vested in them. And it has not been in their interest to tell the truth. This is again why some of the criminal operators have a problem, and this is back to the question earlier with Donald J. Trump. If you understand trust law and you understand treaties and constitutional principles and jurisdiction that involve every one of them, you would not be caught up in prejudice arguments, stupid arguments, pro or con concerning Donald Trump, but you'd be simply looking at the facts and recognize that in principle, you know, you take it all with a grain of salt. But in principles of law, in fact, Donald Trump is better than the entire membership of the Democratic Party of the Knights of Columbus Ku Klux Klan wrapped together in a royal package of doo-doo dung with ribbons.
Now that's not what's being displayed and promoted by the MSM and all of, you know, everything, the BLM, the ANTIFA, and all of these things that are trying to get us to.
It's indicative that they're doing that, and that, again, like I said
the
before,
entertainment world and all of the media and all everybody.
I'll say this, and this is why you have to qualify, because people are ignorant of jurisdiction. And I always have to qualify it. I say, I'm not defending Donald Trump. I will present the facts and let you see them for yourselves. However, if people don't understand jurisdiction, which they've been demonstrating, they've been following the mainstream narrative against their own interest and don't know it, that they're voluntarily creating voluntary jurisdictions that they were led into deceptively.
Who is they?
Our people, particularly. That's the Aboriginal people of the land, most of whom don't know that they're Aboriginal to the land, which is also a mental political jurisdiction that's operative. And this is back to solutions. You get no solutions and you get no justice nor remedy with the people who are claiming to have or requesting or commanding or demanding a preservation of rights when they don't know or comprehend jurisdictional issues, when they're arguing the nature of jurisdictional issues without knowing that that's what they're arguing. And then they contradict what they themselves are asking for or asking to address when they mix it with another false jurisdiction within the venue of that argument, not knowing what they're talking about, talking from an emotional perspective rather than the facts. So if they don't understand in personam jurisdiction, they're not going to operate from that position. 9 times out of 10, their words are going to contradict. Their requests are going to contradict. They're going to fail to exercise a right because they will know that they have a right. Then they would give leave to an enemy of their rights through the Barristers Association in the quest for claiming a right, which indicates their leader guys have not been teaching jurisdiction. Now, that's correct, because if they understood jurisdiction, which we're trying to address, and this is minimal, a lot of the questions that are asked really were already answered, and these people would answer themselves. But I guarantee you this too, a lot less time would be wasted on what you call circular motions, or people going around in circles trying to solve problems, because they will discover for themselves that their concepts are wrong.
No question. Yusuf 7 says, Islam grants you Kash. Through all your years of being in the movement, what are some of the things that you've seen that has yielded what the Prophet was bringing back, i.e. lifting up humanity, civics, etc.?
Let's look at the questionnaire. When he said, how did the Prophet begin to uplift the Moorish Americans? Answer, by teaching them to be themselves. Now, when you say that, then you do some research. You also made this statement continuously. Go back to that state of mind of your ancient mothers and fathers. When you do, you will discover that organized government known as civics were actually taught to the rest of the world by the Moors, your forefathers. And those fundamental rules that many of you have accredited to others are actually your own organized governmental sciences, etc. And once you understand jurisdiction, you would understand what Jurali was saying. And you would also understand and comprehend why, and what was the nature of why was, and this would be a question and also a statement for you to consider in relationship to your question. Do you notice how, like, in the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, in the Moorish Science Temple of America, and the old Canaanite temple, when you know the real history of the Moorish Divine and National Movement under the guidance of the illustrious Prophet Noble, he would mention Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and he would be called Garvey would be referred to as the forerunner, and often you would hear people even refer to people in the Garvey movement, and also in people who are part of the operations of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science. They will be referred to loosely as Garveyites. And so this is a fact. Do some research. And so then you'll recognize when you do research that the Moorish Holy Temple of Science was registered as a civic organization. But you'll see a lot of people among whom these questions might arise will never state that fact to the people, because they don't want them to look at civics and recognize that there's been some breaches along the way as to why even these questions that should have been answered decades ago are asked today, which they should be asked, because they would be self-evident. And you would see that the people would be recognizing that these were political jurisdictions that were constructed in order to execute and to propagate fundamental principled information that was needed and necessary for the people to be uplifted socially, economically, and politically. And you'll see also, for those of you who have done some research, you will see that the prophet Noble made this statement along this line. And then you can examine that statement and then examine your question and also examine my response to that question. He says, if you don't believe that the programs that I have for the redemption of my people and the citizens are correct, go to those who know law. Examine what I just said, then go back to your question, then go back to some of the things I've been telling you right now, and you will answer your own question. Plus, you'll answer it for a lot of other people.
He's also asking what you've seen over your years of, what I see is to address what the prophet said.
This is what I see. I see the resistance, or what you call.
Matter of fact, if you go back before you go there, you've seen. There was a time when you talk about you were able to send people over to with your signature and get things changed and so forth, and corrected and so forth. From that point when you were doing that to where we are now with all this, I mean, how did you get to that point where there was an acceptance?
Number one, sincerity and organized activity. That's what did it. That was mainly Grace Hill. Sincerity and organized activities. And of course, instructions, not unlike what we do at the House of Reawakening Minds on multiple levels, which comprises more science. It's not, people's concept of more sciences has been constricted. So when they're looking at more science, a lot of people, it doesn't dawn on them that it's metaphysics.
Right.
It doesn't dawn on them that it's Reiki. It doesn't dawn on them that it's proper eating. It doesn't dawn on them that it's cosmology. It doesn't dawn on them that it's liberal arts. It doesn't dawn on them that it's etymology. It doesn't dawn on them that it's epistemology. It doesn't dawn on them that it's philology. It doesn't dawn on them that it's architecture. Because they've been told that it's a religious prayer. And so the mind is constricted. But more science is actually cosmological science, a knowledge of the elements of the earth, knowledge of the plant life, a knowledge of metrology, how cities on the earth plane is laid out based on the stars, which are cosmological, even all the symbolisms, etc. The activation of the glandular system of the body, the evolutionary development and activation of these systems that also have a reflective, what people would call ethereal level, that also is kind of falsely referred to as a spiritual level. That's more science. And then we could go on and on and on. But many of the people keep thinking that it's a belief system. And I understand, because that's the way many people have falsely presented. But again, I'll say this again, if we, just like the prophet said in relationship to this morals, he says, if I could just get you all thinking again, you'd save yourselves. The subject matter of jurisdiction is to try to, again, and this is redundant, to get our people thinking, because most of the questions that rightfully arise and have arisen rightfully would be self-evident answer. And it's sort of like until one begins to really study the different aspects of life and organized government, you can't appreciate it till you see it for yourself. Mm-hmm. And this is again why I brought up the subject of jurisprudence and jurisdiction, because I recognize and know that it affects every part of our lives, and it's a broad import. But yet you'll see so many areas where people who have been erudite in many disciplines have come on different venues, and particularly in these late years, and it's becoming known around the world, because you already know you have fan base in China, Japan, Honduras, Ecuador, Borican, Dominica, Haiti, etc., and the UK, Canada. So we have, you know that there are people that's in other nation states,
Absolutely.
jurisdictions that are listening. And this has been, it's become, meaning that the
Even
House
in
of
the Netherlands.
yes, the House of Reawakening Minds has become known around the world for bringing different people on, not constricting in some kind of tunnel vision venue, and in the process is liberating the people. Those principles, just and not unlike what the prophet said. Go back to those principles of your ancient mothers and fathers. He says, I've given you more than enough to save yourselves. Now go out and redeem your people. And all of us are always coming short. We're trying, but we come short. But I will honestly say this, and it's not with bias, it's only with truth. I'm just grateful to be a part of the House of Reawakening Minds, which has proven over the years to be a venue where free thought is not constricted, so that people with broad minds, thinkers, researchers, scholars, true doctors, which means teacher, really, in the different disciplines of more science, because more science is actually organized civil government as well as spiritual instruction. All of it together is more science in cosmology. Including the fact that there's people been reaching out to you from many venues who would not even think about going to other venues that many of us have been involved in, knowing that those venues are constricted.
Right.
I'm saying, and this is not in defense of, it's just being honest. The House of Reawakening Minds, for me, in real analysis, represents the nature of free thought venue that is needed to help uplift the people, because you cannot restrict thinking if you're going to liberate the people. You cannot constrict people thinking if you're going to have people evolve mentally and thus spiritually. You cannot be restrictive. You've got to be open-minded. You've got to have the multiple levels of information available to the people in all the disciplines that affect the human condition. And with all due respect, the House of Reawakening Minds, with all of our shortcomings and flaws, has at least met that grade. And I ain't patting you on the back, I'm just telling you the truth.
It was not me, it's all the people that do that. So I appreciate you. We appreciate you because you've been a integral rather, and very foundational part of what is going on here. So much respect to you. Let me see if there are any more questions. The bank, okay. The bank of, someone wants to know, what's up? The Bank of Atmarian. Can you speak on the bank and give us some information on how things are going to be done, if you would? Thank you.
First, with the question, present the aspects of the Bank of Atmari that they're making reference to.
You asking me?
Yes, I'm for the person who's asking that question.
Can you speak on I guess they're just asking if you could explain what it is and what it means, I guess, to our people. I mean, I've seen some things with regard to the brother that transitioned.
Yeah, we
Uriel.
know. Yes, Israel. Yeah.
So I was thinking, but
Uriel, because Uriel has come to our classes in New York.
Right.
Now, of course, you already know this is what would be considered in law, in legitimacy, a legitimate banking operation by true Americans.
Okay.
Now, if you want to look at the details on any activity that would be presented to the people, then you would measure by aspects of Moorish history, whether they're dealing with the cosmological nature of the true culture, dealing with gold, silver, true commerce, etc., or whether or not we would be dealing with a conditional compromission, knowing that we're under political occupation by the Jesuit order in these jurisdictions, which we're talking jurisdiction, and then you would answer that question yourself.
I mean, there are others that I know have tried and or are trying,
which all of us are doing on multiple levels.
to do various and sundry.
And this is very important, because now this is important, and the question is important because now it necessitates us in the quest for correcting and bringing justice and honor and integrity back into the social political platforms. You're dealing with jurisdictions. Because now we also know that while we're in transition, and these are things that are happening also with Donald Trump, etc., which we told about for the last 5 to 7 years, telling people that the nations of the earth were going to stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds.
I can attest
and
to that.
that you're going to have a feedback loop. And we're telling people to take their fiat, not their money. They don't have money. They need to. This is back to why we did the fiat, issue. We have to get our people really understanding jurisdiction, because you have aggregate and then you have abstract. As an example, people get into the discussion of banking, then not understanding really the jurisdiction of the fact that they themselves are a bank.
Yeah, because you could.
No, I'm just saying, really comprehending that. You can say that and you hear people repeat that. But if you ask them to put on paper the explanation of it, they would have to show you beginnings, endings, limitations, and issues of jurisdiction. Because now you have limits of jurisdiction because you're interchanging with other people who also have entities that have instrumentalities that cross jurisdictions, and all of them are mixed between valid and invalid. And as a matter of fact, most of anything that's even valid in law are more recent activities with people who are buying and selling, or what you would call trading for silver and gold. Fact, aggregate silver and gold, and or dealing with specified jurisdictional instrumentality